The year was 2387, and humanity had finally taken its place among the stars, joining the vast galactic concord that united over 200 spacefaring species across the known universe. Ambassador Zethkara of the Volanti Dominion stood at the observation deck of the orbital shuttle, his bioluminescent crest flickering with shades of purple and gold as he watched the massive ring of structures come into view around Earth. "What exactly are we looking at?" he asked, his translator device converting his clicking speech into smooth human words. Admiral Helena Vasquez stood beside him, her gray uniform pressed and perfect, her silver hair tied back in a tight bun that showed every hard line of her weathered face. "This is our heritage ring," she said, and there was something in her voice that the alien ambassador could not quite understand, something between pride and sadness. "These are the warships that protected humanity through our darkest times." The shuttle moved closer, and Zethkara could now see them clearly. Dozens upon dozens of massive vessels locked in orbital cradles, their hulls dark and silent against the backdrop of space. Some were sleek and angular, while others were bulky and covered in what looked like rust and old battle scars. There were carriers that stretched for kilometers and destroyers that bristled with weapons that had not fired in over a century. "The USS Defiance," Vasquez said, pointing to a massive battleship that seemed to dominate the others around it. "She fought in the Mars Rebellion and the Belt Wars. Over 3,000 crew members served on her at any given time." Zethkara's crest flickered with amusement as he studied the ancient vessel. "And you keep these things why exactly?" he asked, and there was a mocking tone in his translated words that made Vasquez's jaw tighten. "They are part of our history," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "We preserve them so future generations can understand what our ancestors went through." The Volanthi ambassador let out a series of clicks that his translator converted into laughter. "How wonderfully primitive," he said, turning to face the human admiral with his 4 eyes gleaming. "My species gave up warfare over 50,000 years ago. We found it to be inefficient and barbaric." Vasquez said nothing, but her hands curled into fists at her sides. The shuttle docked at the main museum station, and a young human guide named Marcus Chen greeted them with a warm smile and a practiced welcome speech. He led them through corridors lined with displays showing the history of human warfare, from ancient swords and shields to the nuclear weapons of the 20th century. Zethkara stopped at a display showing images of old Earth battles, his crest now pulsing with what looked like disgust. "You celebrate this?" he asked, gesturing at images of soldiers and explosions. "You teach your young ones about killing and destruction?" "We teach them about sacrifice," Marcus replied, and his young voice carried a weight that surprised the ambassador. "We teach them that freedom has a price, and that sometimes good people have to do terrible things to protect those they love." The Volanthi made another clicking laugh. "Such romantic notions," he said dismissively. "The Galactic Concord has maintained peace for over 100,000 years through diplomacy and economic cooperation. War is obsolete. These relics of yours belong in the recycling furnaces, not floating around your planet like some kind of shrine to violence." Admiral Vasquez stepped forward, her eyes hard as steel. "With respect, Ambassador, these ships represent more than just violence," she said. "They represent the courage and determination of the men and women who crewed them. They remind us of what we are capable of when our backs are against the wall." Zethkara waved a slender limb dismissively. "Capability for destruction is nothing to be proud of," he replied. "The truly advanced species have evolved beyond such primitive instincts. Perhaps in another few thousand years, humanity will mature enough to understand this." The tour continued through the Heritage Ring with the ambassador making snide comments at every stop. He laughed at the nuclear torpedoes on the HMS Sovereign Dawn. He mocked the railguns of the Chinese vessel Tianlong. He called the plasma lances of the Invaders dangerous toys for dangerous children. Other aliens in the Galactic Concord had similar views, and within days the story of humanity's war museum had spread across 1,000 worlds. Species that had never met a human were already laughing at them. "Did you hear about the humans?" became a popular joke at diplomatic gatherings. They keep their old killing machines as decorations. They polish instruments of death and show them to their children like precious artwork. The Concord Council issued a formal statement expressing concern about humanity's attachment to military history. Several species suggested that Earth should dismantle the Heritage Ring as a sign of their commitment to galactic peace. But humanity refused. The United Earth Council released a simple response that said humanity would preserve its history, both the good and the bad, and that the Heritage Ring would remain exactly where it was. This only increased the mockery. Admiral Vasquez returned to Earth after the disastrous tour, feeling tired and angry. She stood at her office window looking up at the night sky where she knew the Heritage Ring was orbiting, invisible but always there. Her aide, a young lieutenant named Sarah Kim, entered with a cup of coffee. "The Volante ambassador gave an interview," Sarah said quietly. "He called us children playing with dangerous toys and suggested the Concord should supervise our military capabilities." Vasquez took the coffee and sipped it slowly. "Let them laugh," she said, and her voice was calm, but there was fire burning in her eyes. "Let them mock us and call us primitive. Those ships up there saved humanity more times than I can count. My grandmother served on the Defiance during the Belt Wars. My great-grandfather died on the Sovereign Dawn, defending Earth from the orbital bombardment of 2156. She turned to face her young aide. "The Concord has forgotten what war is," she said. "They've lived in peace for so long that they think violence is something that only happens to lesser species. But the universe is vast and dark, Lieutenant, and peace is never guaranteed." Sarah nodded, though she did not fully understand what her admiral meant. "What do we do now?" she asked. Vasquez looked back at the stars. "We maintain our ships," she said. "We keep them ready. We train our people to remember the old ways, even if we hope we never have to use them again." She paused, and her next words were barely a whisper. "Because someday, Sarah, the galaxy might need those primitive relics. And when that day comes, humanity will be ready." Far above Earth, the ancient warships floated in silence, their weapons cold and their engines dead. But deep within their hulls, the fusion cores still waited, patient as sleeping giants, ready to wake at a moment's notice. The galaxy laughed at humanity's museum ships. They would not be laughing for much longer. The first warning came from a Volante border station on the edge of charted space, and it was not so much a message as it was a scream. "Something is coming." The station commander had shouted into the communication array before the transmission dissolved into static and terrible clicking sounds that no translator could identify. "They are eating everything. They are eating us. Send help." Send. And then there was nothing but silence. The Galactic Concord responded with calm efficiency, dispatching a diplomatic vessel to investigate. What they assumed was some kind of technical malfunction, or perhaps a minor dispute with an unknown species. The diplomatic vessel never reported back. 3 days later, the Kethver swarm emerged from the darkness between stars and fell upon the outer colonies of the Concord like a wave of living nightmares. They were not like anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their ships were not built from metal, but grown from organic matter. Massive bio-cruisers that pulsed with alien life. They did not communicate through words or signals, but through a hive mind that connected millions of warrior drones to a single terrible consciousness. And they were hungry. The Kethver did not want territory or resources or political power. They wanted biomass. They wanted to consume every living thing they encountered, and use the raw material to grow more ships and breed more warriors. They were locusts on a galactic scale, and they had found a galaxy fat with life. The Concord species that had spent 100,000 years perfecting the art of diplomacy suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that did not negotiate. Their elegant peacekeeping drones, designed to subdue crowds with non-lethal energy pulses, were torn apart by HFY warriors that felt no pain and feared no death. Their sleek diplomatic vessels, built for comfort and speed rather than combat, cracked open like eggs against the organic armor of the biocruisers. Ambassador Zethkara, the same Volanthi who had laughed at humanity's war museum just months before, stood on the bridge of a refugee transport as his homeworld burned behind him. "Why are they not responding to our surrender signals?" he screamed at the ship's captain, his bioluminescent crest flashing with pure terror. "We have offered them everything. Territory, resources, slaves. Why will they not talk to us?" The captain, a Volanthi female with haunted eyes, turned to face him. "They do not want our surrender," she said, and her voice was hollow with despair. "They want our flesh." The HFY swarm ships descended on the Volanthi homeworld like a cloud of death. 12 billion citizens who had never known war watched in helpless horror as their cities were torn apart and their people were harvested like crops. Ambassador Zethkara died screaming, just like the billions he had once governed. The massacre repeated itself across the galaxy. Species that had evolved beyond violence found themselves helpless against enemies who had evolved for nothing else. Worlds that had not seen bloodshed in millennia were drowned in it. The Concord's carefully maintained peace shattered like glass under an iron fist. And through it all, the HFY kept coming, always hungry, always growing. The human fleet stationed at Proxima Centauri was the first to actually fight back. Admiral Chen Wei commanded 32 modern patrol vessels, ships designed for escort duty and ceremony rather than real combat. But when the HFY swarm arrived in human space, he did not hesitate. "All ships, battle formation," he ordered, and his voice was steady, even though he knew what was coming. "We are going to buy Earth as much time as we can. Make every shot count." The Battle of Proxima lasted 3 terrible days. The human ships fought with everything they had, and for the first time, the HFY faced enemies who did not run or surrender. The patrol vessels darted through the swarm like angry hornets, their weapons blazing, their crews fighting to the last breath. Admiral Chen Wei rammed his flagship into a HFY command organism when his weapons ran dry, detonating his reactor core in a flash of nuclear fire that took a dozen enemy vessels with him. But it was not enough. When the battle ended, only 3 human ships remained, limping back toward Earth with their hulls torn open and their crews decimated. They had destroyed over 50 HFY vessels, more than the entire rest of the Concorde combined, but the swarm had thousands more. Admiral Helena Vasquez received the survivors at Earth's orbital defense station, her face pale as she listened to their reports. "The HFY will be here within 2 weeks," the surviving captain told her, his uniform stained with blood and his eyes empty with exhaustion. "There are hundreds of them, maybe more. Our modern ships cannot stop them. Nothing can stop them." Vasquez dismissed the young man to the medical bay and then stood alone in her command center, staring at the tactical display that showed the approaching swarm like a red stain spreading across the map. Earth's remaining defense fleet consisted of 12 patrol ships and a handful of orbital platforms. Against the HFY swarm, they would last perhaps an hour. She thought about her grandmother's stories of the Belt Wars, about the desperate battles and the impossible victories. She thought about the heritage ring floating above Earth, those ancient ships that the galaxy had mocked and ridiculed. And then she thought about something her grandmother had once told her, words that had stayed with her across all the years of her career. We never throw away our warships, Helena, the old woman had said. We might mothball them, we might turn them into museums, but we never truly let them go. Because the universe is a dangerous place, and you never know when you might need them again. Vasquez straightened her shoulders and activated the emergency communication channel to the United Earth Council. This is Admiral Vasquez, she said, and her voice was hard as iron. I am requesting emergency authorization to reactivate the Heritage Ring. All ships, all weapons, everything we have. There was a long silence before the council chairman responded. Admiral, those ships are antiques. They have not been operational in over a century. How can they possibly help us? Vasquez allowed herself a small, grim smile. Because they were built to kill, Chairman. Not to patrol or escort or flag. They were built by a species that had spent its entire existence at war, and they were designed to do one thing and one thing only: destroy our enemies completely and utterly. The Concorde will never approve. The Concorde is dead. Vasquez cut him off. The Volanthi are gone. The Kreth are gone. Half the galaxy is being eaten while the other half runs away. We are humanity's last hope, and those old ships are only chance. Another long silence. Admiral, even if we authorize this, those ships have been museums for generations. Do we even have people who know how to operate them? Vasquez nodded, though the chairman could not see her. We have veterans and their children and their grandchildren. We have engineers who have spent their careers maintaining those relics. We have docents who know every system on every ship because they have been explaining them to tourists for decades. She paused, and her next words carried the weight of human history. And we have something the Concorde never understood, Chairman. We have people who never forgot how to fight. Give me the authorization, and I will give you a fleet that will make the Kethver regret ever entering our space. The chairman's response came slowly, heavily, like a man signing his own death warrant. Authorization granted, Admiral. May God help us all. Vasquez closed the channel and turned to face her staff. Wake the old gods, she commanded. Humanity is going to war. The call went out across Earth and all its colonies, a simple message that carried the weight of desperation and hope. Humanity needs you. If you have served on a warship, if you have maintained a warship, if you have ever dreamed of serving on a warship, report to the Heritage Ring immediately. This is not a drill. And they came. From retirement homes and universities, from farms and factories, from every corner of human civilization, they came. Old men and women who had served on those ancient vessels, when they were young, straightened their stooped backs and reported for duty. Engineers who had spent decades keeping the museum ships presentable, now prepared to make them deadly. Young volunteers who had grown up on stories of the old wars lined up by the thousands, eager to write new chapters in humanity's long history of survival. Marcus Chen, the young museum guide who had led Ambassador Zethkora on that fateful tour, stood at the entrance to the USS Defiance and watched the crowd streaming toward the docking bays. His grandmother, a tiny woman of 93 named Lin Chun, walked beside him with a cane in one hand and fire in her eyes. I served on this ship for 12 years, she said, her voice thin but steady. I was a weapons officer during the Belt Wars. I thought I would never see her fly again. Marcus helped her up the boarding ramp, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Grandmother, are you sure about this? The doctor said, the doctors can wait. Lynn snapped. I did not survive 3 wars just to hide in a bunker while aliens eat my planet. Now help me to the bridge. Similar scenes played out across the Heritage Ring as generation after generation of spacers returned to their old ships. Captain James Morrison, a man of 78 who had commanded the HMS Sovereign Dawn in his youth, walked the corridors of his old vessel with tears streaming down his weathered face. Every scratch on the walls, every dent in the panels, brought back memories of battles fought and friends lost. "She remembers me," he whispered, running his hand along the cold metal. After all these years, she still remembers. Chief Engineer Priya Sharma stood in the engine room of the Invaders, surrounded by young engineers who stared at the ancient fusion reactor with a mixture of awe and terror. "This design is over 200 years old," one of them protested. "We trained on quantum drives and antimatter containment. How are we supposed to operate this thing?" Priya smiled and pulled an old manual from her bag, its pages worn and stained with decades of use. "My mother gave me this when I was young," she said. "She served on the Vijaya during the Titan crisis. She made me memorize every system, every procedure, every emergency protocol. She said that someday humanity might need the old ships again, and when that day came, someone had to know how to run them." The young engineers gathered around her as she began to teach them the secrets of fusion reactors and plasma conduits, knowledge that had been passed down through generations like sacred fire. Admiral Vasquez walked the length of the Heritage Ring, watching her impossible fleet come to life. In Dock 7, the Chinese vessel Tianlong groaned as her railguns were loaded with ammunition that had been manufactured a century ago. The old shells were still good, their magnetic casings preserved by the vacuum of space. In Dock 12, the Japanese destroyer Yamato II shuddered as her engines ignited for the first time in 80 years. Her captain, a young woman named Yuki Tanaka, who was the great-granddaughter of the original commander, saluted Vasquez as she passed. In Dock 23, a dozen smaller vessels from different nations were being crewed by mixed teams of veterans and volunteers who had never met before, but who shared a common determination to protect their home. Vasquez stopped at the bridge of the USS Defiance, where Lin Chun now sat at the weapons console, her ancient fingers dancing across controls that had not been touched in generations. "How does she look?" Vasquez asked. The old woman's smile was fierce and proud. "She is angry," Lin replied. "She has been sleeping for too long, and now she wants blood. The weapon systems are online, Admiral. The nuclear torpedoes are armed and ready. Just point us at the enemy, and let us do what we were built to do." The ship's eye, a simple combat system that had been considered obsolete when the Concorde vessels were still using stone tools, spoke in a voice like grinding steel. "Combat systems online. All weapons charged. Enemy detection grid active. Awaiting target designation." Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine as she heard that mechanical voice, so different from the smooth and sophisticated ideas of modern vessels. This was not a system designed to be pleasant or helpful. This was a system designed to kill. "How many ships do we have?" she asked her aide. Lieutenant Sarah Kim checked her datapad. 47 vessels are operational, Admiral. We have 12 battleships, 15 destroyers, 8 carriers, and 12 support craft. Crew complement is approximately 60,000, though most of them have never seen actual combat. Vasquez nodded grimly. "What about the Concorde? Are they sending any help?" Sarah's expression darkened. "The Concorde Council has issued a formal protest, Admiral. They say our reactivation of military vessels violates 12 different treaties. They are demanding that we stand down and allow them to negotiate with the Kethvar." "Negotiate?" Vasquez's laugh was bitter. "The Kethvar have eaten 17 civilizations. What exactly do the Concorde think they are going to negotiate?" A communication signal interrupted them, a priority message from the Concorde Council itself. Vasquez accepted the call, and the holographic image of a Kreth diplomat appeared on the bridge. The alien's tentacles writhed with agitation. "Admiral Vasquez, you must stop this madness. Those weapons are illegal under Concorde law. If you attack the Kethvar, you will be no better than they are." Vasquez stared at the alien for a long moment. "Diplomat, The Kethver will be in Earth orbit in less than a week. My people will be harvested like livestock unless we fight. What exactly do you suggest we do? Surrender. The Kreth replied without hesitation. Open negotiations. Perhaps if you offer them a portion of your population, they will spare the rest. The bridge fell silent as the human crew stared at the alien with expressions of disgust and rage. You want us to sacrifice our own people? Vasquez asked quietly, and her voice was more dangerous for its softness. You want us to hand over billions of innocent lives to be eaten? It is the logical choice. The diplomat insisted. Fighting will only make things worse. Violence is never the answer. Vasquez reached out and terminated the communication, her hand trembling with barely controlled fury. Lieutenant Kim, send a message to all ships. Tell them that the Concorde will not be helping us. Tell them that we are on our own. She turned to face the viewscreen, where the stars shone cold and distant. And tell them that when the Kethver arrive, they will find out what happens when you threaten humanity. They will learn why we kept these old ships. They will discover that some species never forget how to fight. Across the Heritage Ring, the ancient warships powered up their engines and began to move into formation. Their hulls were scarred and their systems were old, but their hearts were strong and their crews were ready. The museum ships were going to war. The Kethver swarm entered the Sol system like a plague of darkness. 300 biocruisers and countless smaller vessels that blotted out the stars themselves. The hive mind that controlled them felt something like satisfaction as it detected the small cluster of vessels waiting near the third planet. Another easy harvest. Another civilization to consume. These primitives would fall just like all the others. But as the swarm drew closer, the hive mind noticed something strange about the waiting ships. They were not sleek and elegant like the vessels it had encountered before. They were angular and brutal, covered in weapons that the hive mind did not recognize. And they were not running. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, surrounded by her crew of veterans and volunteers, watching the approaching swarm on the tactical display. All ships, this is the Admiral, she said over the fleet-wide channel. The enemy has arrived. They have destroyed civilizations that were ancient when humanity was still living in caves. They have eaten worlds without number, and they think they will eat us too. She paused, letting her words sink in. They are wrong. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Today, we fight not just for Earth, but for every species that the Kethver have devoured. Today, we prove that the universe made a terrible mistake when it came for humanity. Lin Chun's voice crackled over the internal com, fierce and eager. Admiral, weapons are locked and loaded. The old girl is ready to dance. Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. Then let us begin. All ships, attack formation Alpha. Fire at will. The Heritage Fleet surged forward, 47 ancient warships against 300 Kethver biocruisers, and the Battle of Sol began. The USS Defiance fired first, her nuclear torpedoes streaking across the void like arrows of light. They struck the lead biocruiser and detonated inside its organic hull, the nuclear fire spreading through its internal systems like a disease. The Kethver had never encountered nuclear weapons. The Concorde had banned such things millennia ago as too destructive, too dangerous. But humanity had never thrown them away. And now those ancient instruments of death tore through the swarm like wolves through sheep. The Tinlong's railguns opened fire, magnetic accelerators hurling slugs of dense metal at impossible speeds. The projectiles punched through organic armor as if it were paper, each impact sending shockwaves through the biocruisers that disrupted the delicate neural networks controlling them. The In's Vigia's plasma lances carved burning lines through the enemy formation, weapons that the Concorde had once deemed too destructive, now proving their worth against an enemy that deserved destruction. The Kefir hive mind reeled in confusion and something it had never experienced before: fear. These creatures were not like the others. They did not surrender or negotiate or plead for mercy. They fought with weapons designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to kill. The hive mind sent its warrior drones against the human ships, millions of biological killing machines that swarmed through space like angry insects. But the Heritage Fleet had been built to face such threats. The carriers launched fighters, old atmospheric craft that had been modified for space combat, their pilots screaming battle cries as they dove into the swarm. Point defense systems that had not fired in a century roared to life, filling the void with walls of explosive shells that shredded the drones by the thousands. Captain Morrison's HM Sovereign Dawn took a direct hit from a bio-cruiser's acid spray, the corrosive liquid eating through her hull. But the old ship kept fighting, her crew sealing off damaged sections while their comrades continued to pour fire into the enemy. "She's not going down that easy," Morrison shouted, his white hair wild and his eyes blazing. "Return fire, all batteries. Show them what British steel can do." The Sovereign Dawn's main gun spoke, ancient kinetic weapons that had been preserved in perfect working order, and 3 bio-cruisers exploded in sprays of organic matter. But the Kefir were learning. The hive mind adapted its tactics, sending its largest vessels against the human fleet in coordinated attacks. The bio-cruisers rammed into the defenders, their massive bulk crushing smaller ships even as they were torn apart by human weapons. The destroyer Moskva vanished in a flash of light as a bio-cruiser detonated its own internal organs in a suicide attack. The cruiser Snowpolo was torn in half by concentrated acid fire from 6 directions. Admiral Vasquez watched her fleet dying around her, her heart breaking with every ship that went dark on the tactical display. "Admiral, we have lost 18 ships," Sarah Kim reported, her voice cracking with strain. "The enemy has lost over 100, but they just keep coming." Vasquez gripped the arms of her command chair. "Then we keep fighting. All ships, concentrate fire on the command organisms. Cut off the head of the snake." The Kefir hive mind felt the human attacks focusing on its central nodes, the massive bio-cruisers that coordinated the swarm's movements. It tried to protect them, surrounding them with walls of warrior drones and lesser vessels. But the human weapons tore through every defense. Captain Yuki Tanaka's Yamato II led a desperate charge against the largest command organism, her ship surrounded by a dozen smaller vessels that fought like demons possessed, all powered of forward weapons. Tanaka commanded, her face calm despite the chaos around her. "We are going to crack that thing open." The Yamato II's engines flared as she accelerated toward the command organism, her weapons blazing with continuous fire. Biocruisers tried to intercept her but were blasted aside by her escorts. A direct hit struck the Yamato II's engine section, and Tanaka felt her ship shudder beneath her feet. Engineering report. "We have lost main propulsion, Captain. Reactor containment's failing. We have maybe 5 minutes before core breach." Tanaka looked at the command organism looming before her, so close she could see the individual nerve clusters beneath its organic armor. "Then we use those 5 minutes well," she said, and there was no fear in her voice, only determination. "All hands, abandon ship. I am taking her in manually." Her crew protested, but she silenced them with a look. "That thing controls half the swarm. If we kill it, we win. Now get off my ship and let me do my job." The escape pods launched as Captain Tanaka took manual control of the dying Yamato II. She aimed her crippled vessel at the heart of the command organism and pushed what remained of her engines to maximum. The Kefir hive mind recognized the threat too late. It tried to move its command organism out of the way, but the massive biocruiser was too slow. The Yamato II struck the command organism at full speed, her bow piercing the organic armor and plunging deep into the creature's vital systems. And then her reactor breached. The explosion was blinding, a miniature sun that vaporized the command organism and everything within 100 kilometers. The hive mind screamed as half its network went dark. Millions of warrior drones suddenly left without direction, their coordination shattered. "The swarm is breaking up," Sarah Kim shouted, disbelief and hope mingling in her voice. "They are confused. They are retreating." Vasquez rose from her chair. "Do not let them regroup. All ships, pursue and destroy. Show them no mercy because they would show none to us." The Heritage Fleet, battered and bleeding but unbroken, surged after the retreating swarm. The ancient weapons continued their terrible work, turning the void into a graveyard of organic matter and broken dreams. For the first time in their existence, the Kethver knew defeat. For the first time, they ran. And behind them, the museum ships of humanity followed, relentless and merciless, proving that some relics still had teeth. The Battle of Seoul lasted 19 hours. When it finally ended, the void around Earth was filled with debris, a graveyard of shattered biocruisers and broken human ships, drifting together in silent testament to the fury that had been unleashed. Of the 47 museum ships that had fought, only 11 remained. 36 ancient vessels had been destroyed, their crews lost to the darkness of space. Over 30,000 humans had died defending their homeworld. But the Kethver were broken. Their command structure had been shattered by Captain Tanaka's sacrifice. Their swarm, which had devoured 17 civilizations without pause, had been cut down to less than 50 vessels that now fled into the darkness between stars. Their hive mind filled with an emotion they had never known: terror. Admiral Helena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, her arm in a sling from wounds she had received when a console exploded beside her. The ship around her was barely holding together, her hull breached in a dozen places, and her systems running on emergency power. But she was still flying. "Admiral," Sarah Kim said softly, approaching with a datapad. "The final casualty reports are in." "We lost. I know how many we lost," Vasquez interrupted, her voice tired and heavy. "I knew every captain, every ship. Some of them were friends I had served with for decades." She turned to look at the tactical display, now clear of red enemy markers for the first time in weeks. "What about the Kethver survivors?" "The remaining Concord species have found their courage," Sarah reported. "They are pursuing the remnants with weapons we provided. Designs from our old ships, nuclear and kinetic, the things they banned millennia ago. They are finally fighting back." Vasquez nodded slowly. Then something good came from all this death. Lin Chun approached, leaning heavily on her cane, her ancient face lined with exhaustion but still burning with fierce pride. "Admiral, the Defiance is requesting permission to stand down from combat status. The old girl gave everything she had, but she needs rest." Vasquez placed a hand on the old woman's shoulder. "Permission granted." "You did incredible work today, Lin. Your grandmother would have been proud." "My grandmother is the one who taught me," Lin replied with a thin smile. "She always said that the Defiance would rise again when humanity needed her. I just never thought I would be alive to see it." A communication signal interrupted them, an incoming message from the Galactic Concord Council. Vasquez accepted the call and found herself facing a dozen holographic projections, representatives from the surviving Concord species. Their expressions ranged from shame to gratitude to something that looked like fear. The Kreth diplomat who had demanded humanity's surrender spoke first, his tentacles hanging limp with submission. "Admiral Vasquez, on behalf of the Galactic Concord, we wish to express our deepest gratitude for your actions today. Humanity has saved not just Earth but the entire galaxy from the Kethver menace." Vasquez remained silent, waiting. "We also wish to apologize. the diplomat continued, his voice subdued. We mocked your military traditions. We called you primitives for preserving your warships. We were wrong. Another diplomat, a being from a species Vasquez did not recognize, leaned forward. Admiral, we must ask you something. Why? Why did you keep those old weapons? Why did you preserve the memory of war when the rest of us worked so hard to forget it? Vasquez looked around the bridge of the Defiance, at the worn consoles and scarred walls, at the crew members who had fought so hard and lost so much. Because peace is not the absence of war, she said slowly. Peace is what you build after you have learned what war truly costs. We keep those ships to remember the price our ancestors paid. We keep them to teach our children that freedom is never free. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The Concorde forgot that lesson. You lived in peace for so long that you thought violence was something that only happened to lesser species. You convinced yourselves that war was obsolete, that advanced civilizations had evolved beyond such primitive instincts. Her voice hardened. But the universe does not care about your evolution. The universe is vast and dark and full of things that want to consume you. And when those things come, all your diplomacy and economic cooperation will not save you. Only strength will save you. Only the willingness to fight. The Concorde diplomats shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet her eyes. We understand now, the Creth said quietly. We have begun building our own military forces, using the weapon designs you shared with us. We will not be helpless again. Good, Vasquez replied. But remember why we fight. Not for conquest or glory or power. We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We fight so that others can live in peace. She gestured at the debris field visible through the view screen. 30,000 of my people died today. They gave their lives so that Earth would survive, so that the Concorde would have time to find its courage. Honor their sacrifice by building a galaxy where such sacrifice is never needed again. The communication ended, and Vasquez slumped in her chair, suddenly feeling every one of her years. What happens now? Sarah asked softly. Now we rebuild, Vasquez said. We repair the ships that can be repaired. We build new ships to replace those we lost. And we make sure that humanity is never caught unprepared again. She looked up at the view screen, at the stars that shone cold and distant. But we also remember. We remember Captain Tanaka and her crew. We remember the 30,000 who gave everything. We add their names to the walls of the Heritage Ring, alongside all the others who died defending humanity throughout our history. A month later, a memorial ceremony was held at the Heritage Ring. The 11 surviving museum ships floated in formation around a new monument, a massive sculpture depicting a human hand reaching toward the stars while clutching a sword. Admiral Vasquez stood before a crowd of thousands, survivors and families and dignitaries from across the Concorde, and spoke the names of the fallen one by one. Captain Yuki Tanaka, Commander James Morrison, Lieutenant Lin Chun, who had passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 days after the battle. Thousands more, each name a life cut short in defense of everything humanity held dear. When she finished, Vasquez turned to face the monument. They asked us why we kept our old ships, she said, and her voice carried across the void to every ear. They called us primitive and barbaric for preserving instruments of death. She raised her hand in salute. But those instruments saved the galaxy. Those relics that the Concorde ridiculed proved to be the only weapons capable of stopping the Kethvar. Our ancestors built them, our veterans maintained them, and when the darkness came, they were ready. She lowered her hand. So we will continue to keep our ships. We will continue to preserve our heritage of war and sacrifice. Not because we love violence, but because we understand its necessity. Not because we want to fight, but because we are always ready to fight if we must. Her final words echoed across the stars. They ridiculed our museum ships. They called them relics and antiques. But when the invaders came, those relics proved that humanity never forgets. We never surrender. We never give up. She turned to face the ancient warships floating behind her, the USS Defiance and her sisters, scarred and battered but unbowed. And we never throw away the weapons that keep us free. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Humanity, the strange species that kept their old warships as museums. Humanity, who never forgot how to fight even when the rest of the universe disarmed. Humanity, whose ancient relics had saved civilization itself. The Concord called it survival. Humanity called it heritage. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the surviving Kefir fled ever deeper into the void, their hive mind carrying a new emotion that would haunt them for generations. Fear. Fear of the primitives who refused to surrender. Fear of the museum ships that had torn their swarm apart. Fear of humanity. And that fear would keep the galaxy safe for a very long time,